Hi, I'm Angela Walters from Quilting is My Therapy, and in this video, my friend Shorty and I are going to show you how to machine quilt with rulers. Now, when I sat down and designed these rulers for Creative Grids, I had a specific person in mind for each ruler. And when I designed Shorty, the person I had in mind was somebody that was new to machine quilting with rulers. That's why he's so small. I wanted him to be useful on any kind of sewing machine, whether it was a small or bigger one, and I also wanted him to be hand-sized, and that meant you wouldn't be messing with a ruler that was unwieldy or too large for what you're quilting. Now, that's not to say that it's not great for advanced quilters or even long armers, because you can definitely use them on a long arm. But in this video, I'm going to show you what you need to get started when quilting on your sewing machine. So first, of course, you need a good ruler. Secondly, you might want to consider getting a ruler foot. So a ruler foot is basically a free motion quilting foot with a higher lip on it. What that means is that higher profile is going to prevent the ruler from slipping over the foot and into the needle. Now, we know what can happen if that happens, right? You break your needle, you break your ruler, and you pee your pants. At least this is what I've heard. Now, if you don't have one, it's fine. It's not absolutely necessary, but you might find it helpful, especially if you plan on using those rulers a lot. If you're not sure if your sewing machine manufacturer makes a ruler foot, go ahead and contact them or your dealer and see what they suggest. Most machines can be fitted with a ruler foot. Let me show you what I mean. This is just your basic free motion quilting foot. You might have something pretty similar, but if you were to turn it over and look on the back, you'll see that there's a screw. And what that screw does is here I can loosen it and take that ruler foot attachment off. So if you have a free motion quilting foot that looks similar to this, chances are you can go ahead and get a ruler attachment for it. And if you're not sure, again, go ahead and check with your manufacturer, or you can ask a question in the comments. I'll be glad to answer it. Now, I can almost hear you asking, but Angela, my machine has a high shank. My machine has a low shank foot. Can I use your rulers? Well, not to get confusing, the height of your foot is really what determines that. So some lower shank machines means that your foot is closer to the machine. Now you can tell my machine I have enough clearance for my foot on this side, so I can use my ruler under here should I want to. Now, if the ruler won't fit under your foot on your machine, that doesn't mean that you can't quilt with rulers. You definitely can. You're still going to work from the left or the front of the foot, which is actually, you'll find, where I spend most of my time when quilting with rulers. Okay, so what else do I use when I'm quilting? Now, these are questions that I'm asked all the time, so hopefully you find them helpful. First of all, one thing that I can't machine quilt without is the Supreme slider. Now, that's what this thing is right here. That Supreme slider gives me a nice, smooth, slick surface so that when I'm quilting, that quilt goes through there easier. I normally also wear gloves. Now, I'm not going to in this video since I'm working on a smaller project, but if I'm working on a bigger quilt, you're gonna catch me wearing gloves. I do definitely like those. So I have my Supreme slider on, I have my ruler foot on. Now let's get started with your first stitches. How do you even begin quilting with your ruler? Well, I'm so glad you asked, because you know I'm going to show you how to do it. Okay, I'm excited to get started using Shorty. Now, when you're quilting with rulers, the best thing to think about is that it's like a handle for your quilt. I'm going to position the ruler where I want to go. Once I have it in place, I'm going to press down with my hand, and I'm going to hold my other hand on the other side, and then moving the quilt, I'm going to run it along that ruler. Now what I'm doing is when I press down, I'm actually activating that grip that's on the back of the ruler, and that's helping hold it in place. Now once I decide I'm ready to move on with my line, I'm just going to reposition my ruler like so, and then continue on. So right here, I'm just stitching along that seam. Now you might wonder what these little things right here are for. These are called needle stops, and this is actually, if I wanted to quilt all the way around Shorty, I could make it a repetitive shape. But what I'm doing here is I'm almost using it as a guide along my seam. So if I put that needle stop right along that seam, I can guess that it's going somewhat flush with the quilt up here. Now this is especially helpful if you can't see the direction that you're quilting. Now the movement's going to be exactly the same if I'm pushing the quilt away and bringing the quilting towards me. So once I have it in place, I'm going to push down and start moving the quilt along that ruler. Once I run out of space, I'm just going to reposition and then continue on. Now the thing to remember is we're going for straight-ish lines. We're not going for perfectly straight. It doesn't have to be exact. We're just using that as a guide to help our lines be straighter than we could quilt it with the free motion quilting foot. So for vertical lines, I'm working along the left side of the foot. And this is exactly what I was talking about when I said that even if I can't fit the ruler over here, I actually don't tend to work from this direction anyway, because that foot does get in the way. Now, when I position it horizontally, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to push down and move over, except since I don't really have room to put my hand over here, I might put both of my hands on that ruler and then move it along. If I want to keep going, I would just simply reposition my ruler and continue on. But let's say I want to do some echoing. I'm going to travel up, and let's say I'm going to quilt back the way I just came. I'm going to position my ruler, either putting my ruler on that previously quilted line or just past it. I'm going to press down and then move the whole quilt along this way. And you can see what I'm getting are some nice straight-ish lines. Now let's pretend that you don't want the lines to be so close together. Maybe the person you're quilting this for isn't necessarily quilt worthy and you want to get it done faster. Well, that's where these reference lines come in handy. If I put my ruler along that previously quilted line, I'm going to have about 1/4 inch or so space between them. But if I put one of these dashed lines on my previously quilted line, I'm going to get something that's closer to 1/2 inch spacing. So these markings on here, what they're doing is helping me keep the spacing nice and consistent. So here I have 1/4 inch, that's a little bit closer. Let's do one that's about 3/4 inch. And what I'm going to do is just line up that second line on my previously quilted line, push down and run it along the ruler. Stop and reposition if I need to. And then now you'll see I'm getting my different spacing there. And if I want to quilt a line that's longer than my ruler, all I have to do is quilt it, reposition, and continue on. So this will work over your whole quilt or within defined areas like your borders. Another fun thing about Shorty is that he has rounded edges. Now that's because he can make some really neat designs. If you're a newer quilter, you may find that curves are a little bit harder to quilt with a ruler. So these little baby curves are going to give you just a little taste, let you see what it's like, and then decide if you want to go with a curvier ruler. So let's see those in action. But this is one of those instances that you're going to see I'm working from both sides of my ruler. So if my foot is a little too short and I can't move my ruler under that, I'm going to try a different design. But for here, I'm going to position it and I'm going to work my way around that ruler. I'm keeping the foot flush to the right of the foot and to the ruler. As I go around that curve, the point of contact is going to change. So now I'm kind of at this point of the foot, and I'm going to eventually end up coming around to the bottom of the foot. So as I'm turning that curve, my point of contact between my ruler and my foot is going to be a little bit different. So just keep that in mind, and that will help you keep that curve nice and smooth. Now I'm going to continue along. And as I get to my next curve, I'm going to remember that point of contact is going to be slightly different. I'm going to quilt along it and then back down the side. Now if I wanted to repeat that and do it again, all I have to do is move my ruler over and then quilt along that again. Coming right back up, around the ruler, taking your time and repositioning your hands. This is not meant to do in one complete movement. You can definitely pause and move your hands. And you can see now I'm getting this kind of fun, rounded corner kind of shape. But come on, we know I like quilting things to death. We need to quilt a little bit more in there. So what I'm going to do is actually flip my ruler around and do something like this, where I'm going to quilt them upside down and offset it for a fun kind of design. Now when the ruler is behind my foot, I'm kind of at a disadvantage, right? I can't exactly position my hand where I need it to be. Well, what's great is if I wanted to, I could just rotate my quilt and then continue on this way. So either way is going to be fine. In fact, the more that you quilt, the more you'll find your preferences. I'm going to come until I touch my previously quilted line and then just reposition. How do I know if I have it repositioned correctly? Well, I have this middle line right down my ruler. If I put that middle line right on my previous quilting, it's going to help make sure that this is nice and consistent. And let's go around and continue this. Coming all the way around, take your time, move your hands if you need to, and then come in until you run into that quilting line. And let's do one more. This will be a partial one. And let's see how it turned out. I mean, come on, how cute is that? It's like kind of mod leaves or a fun little design. I definitely can think of some quilts that's going to look amazing on. Now these reference marks that I put on the ruler are not just for aligning the ruler to your quilting, it's also to help you change up the size of your design. This is one of my favorite things about this ruler. Earlier I quilted all the way around and that gave me a really wide shape. But what I can do is quilt around till I get to one of the dashed lines and reposition the ruler, and it's going to give me a more narrow shape. So as I'm quilting, I'm going to run it along that ruler, taking my time. And then once it gets to one of these lines, let's say it gets to that middle line, maybe I think, I don't want to do it much wider than this. I can reposition my ruler and line it up with a different line. So let me line it up with this one. Let's see what we get. And as you can see, I just get a same kind of shape, it's just a little bit more narrow. What if we shrunk it down even more? I'm going to quilt around. I'm going to stop when I get to a line. Maybe I stop at this first line, and I can reposition to that line and then go right along. And then what I have there is another shape. So if I want to do wider arcs, or if I just want to do these along the whole border, I can, just using those reference marks. Another thing you can do with this ruler is treat it almost like a clamshell, in which I quilt a row and then quilt another row on top of it. It makes such a fun effect. This would be a great way to handle bigger areas of your quilt, or just to use your rulers to give it a slightly different look. So as I go around my ruler, and let's do one more, go along my ruler. And again, once I get to this point, I usually switch hands. There we go, I've got two fun shapes. Let's just go ahead and quilt a partial one. Carry it right off the edge of this row. Now what I can do is reposition my ruler and quilt the same thing on top of it. So basically, I'm treating this previously quilted design as the edge of my area, and then going around to fill up that space. Now what happens if they're not perfectly the same size? Nothing, it's totally fine. What happens if one doesn't look quite right? Just keep going, it's gonna look completely fine. But as you can see now, we're starting to see those offset shapes, which are so very fun. So like I said, Shorty is a great way for getting comfortable with straight lines and kind of delving into the curves and having a fun time coming up with a lot of different variations for your designs. So there you have it. Now I know I've thrown a lot of information out at you. Everything from what to do to get started to some fun designs you can quilt with Shorty. So if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. I'll be sure to read and answer the ones that I can. And also, if you have a question about any of the supplies that I've used, that's all in the description box below. So be sure to check those out as well. So now that you're ready to get started, go ahead and get your rulers out and try to make some fun designs. Happy quilting!